Hey, it's Alex, and recently I attempted to use this guy, the iPhone 5S, as my main phone here in 2020. Attempted being the key word. Stick around to hear how the device has aged. Hey, if you like my content, a like, a comment, and a subscription would mean the world to me. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested in learning about how you can win this phone, I'll be doing a giveaway, so stick around to the end of the video to learn about details on how you could potentially win this phone for yourself. So recently I had the crazy idea to spend a week with this phone, which is crazy because it came out in 2013. That makes it 7 years old, and that's as old as Katy Perry's Roar and Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines. This is a crazy idea because the device is no longer supported. It no longer gets iOS updates. It will still get security updates here and there for any straggling users still using it, but by and large, it's not progressing. It's kind of stuck and it's been phased out, if you will. But that's exactly why I wanted to test it out. It gives me an opportunity to see how these Apple devices age when they're no longer supported. So let's run through the list of pros and cons that I had about using this device. Right off the bat, the first positive thing that I like about this phone is the design. Not a lot of people were a fan of this boxy square design when it came out, and I personally really like it. I like it more than the modern curved glass stainless steel kind of a look. I like the boxy square palm design, so I think that's really great. And in addition to that, just the size is nice in many ways, but not in others. So for instance, reachability is awesome to be able to reach any point of the screen no matter how I'm holding it, but it does feel a little cramped to be using a screen this tiny when I'm coming from something as large as a XS Max, which is the largest phone that Apple makes. And it may sound a little weird to say this, but it's almost a philosophy I have that the larger the phone is, the less life you have, the more it sucks away of your time. It's just more, it's pulling you in. Using a phone this tiny, I didn't necessarily feel that same connection to it. I just wanted to use it, do whatever I had to do on it, and then just put it away, mostly because I couldn't stand the tiny screen. I didn't want to be using it for longer than I had to because I just found it to be a burden. And I think that's partially due to number one, the small screen, but then number two, the slow software as well. And then the final pro is just the durability. This thing is not glass on the backside like most modern phones are. So, I mean, there's a downside to that. It doesn't have wireless charging, but at least I can kind of drop it or set it down a little harder than I would in my other devices and not have to worry about it. It just lasts way longer than anything modern would. And that's about it for the positive things that I had with this phone. On to the negatives now. The first negative is going to contradict what I said a minute ago, and that's the tiny screen. While it is nice for reachability, it's terrible for regular content consumption. You just feel cramped on this little screen as opposed to something larger where you feel like you have kind of room to breathe, so to speak. In addition to that tiny screen is also a tiny keyboard. So if I'm looking at a document or typing up a note or typing a text message, it pulls up the keyboard, which is literally half the screen, and the content that I'm actually looking at typing gets shrunk down really tiny and kind of hides behind the keyboard. Again, something that was always there, but now that we've gotten spoiled with larger screens and larger displays, it's really hard to go back to the tiny screen again. It also had very slow response time within the iOS software, and that's normal. Like I say, it's no longer receiving updates because it just can't handle and can't support the newer updates. So it's running the latest version that it can comfortably run without too many bugs. It does have a lot of lag here and there if you're just trying to navigate around the UI, but that's to be expected with an older phone. Another thing that was just a limitation of the device's technology at the time is the screen technology. It's an LCD screen, which means no OLED, no high resolution colors, no sharp images. If I look closely, I can almost see the pixels in this thing. It's not super great. Granted, I believe it is a Retina display. It's still not anywhere near as good as the OLED are on modern screens. A personal preference thing that I didn't care for is the fact that this thing is stuck on running iOS 12, which means there's no dark mode. And since iOS 13 came out, there's been dark mode enabled within the system of your phone, and I've had that on since day one, and I love it. It's just so much easier on the eyes. So going back to the traditional white, the bright white of iPhone, it kind of threw me off a little bit, and it's just not something I'm a fan of. Also, the icon arrangement. This is just how the phones were made back then, but literally just having them so close together feels cramped. Like I can't see my wallpaper, I can't see what's behind them, and that's just not something I'm a fan of. Needless to say, the camera is also pretty bad. It's pretty low resolution. The response time isn't terrible when you're launching it, but it's just not the greatest camera, especially on a smartphone. And I think it goes without saying that also applies to the front-facing camera. Battery life wasn't super great, but again, that's to be expected with a phone this old. I was averaging about 21% at the end of the day, with trying to keep it plugged in as much as possible. If I wasn't using it, I had it plugged in and would just unplug it if I had to use it. I charged it multiple times a day and still ended the day with about 21%. This is compared to about 78%, which is what I've been getting on my XS Max without even having to plug it in at all during the day. So battery life is definitely a negative when it comes to this phone. Something else I didn't like, and it just comes down to personal preference, is Touch ID. When it was the only way of unlocking your phone biometrically, it worked. I was a fan. I thought it was great. It was pretty good. But I've gotten so used to Face ID now that I don't even have to think about unlocking my phone anymore. And Touch ID truly is much slower on this device when you have to kind of press the button and hold your thumb on it. It just feels like an extra step or an extra hiccup before you can get into your phone. And that's something that I've just grown accustomed to not having to deal with. One also very big thing that it was a challenge for me when switching to this phone is the fact that there's very low storage. On the XS Max, I have 64 gigabytes, which by all means should be higher. That's even a little low for a phone, but this thing has a whopping 16 gigabytes of storage right out of the gate, and that's just terrible. It's just terrible. I can hardly fit all the apps that I need to on there, in addition to my messages, in addition to any photos. Nowadays, with apps being larger and file sizes getting larger, that makes it really difficult to not run out of space when you're using this phone. I'm gonna go back to talking about the keyboard for a second, and that is the fact that there's no swipe texting. In the introduction of iOS 13, Apple introduced the ability to swipe on the keyboard to be able to text, and this just doesn't have it because it's running the older software. And I didn't realize how much I actually rely on that without thinking about it. When I would go to the keyboard and go to type something and I got mentally stuck, or like it kind of jolted me like, oh, I can't swipe text. I have to tap, caveman tap through the keyboard. And that's just something that I've gotten so used to. And it was weird to go back and live without it for a week. And then the one final thing that I took note of is just the fact is that because it's running older hardware, it's limited in what it can process. So the internet speed was pretty low. So the Wi-Fi chip inside of it is not going to be as efficient or able to run higher data speeds like modern phones are. So loading up anything, even if it's just a web page in Safari, which is native to the phone, should be able to do quite easily. It just took a while. It took a while to load things that otherwise would have loaded fairly quickly on a newer device. And that's really it. Those are all the pros and cons that I noted over the course of using it for a week. And like I say, it's not really fair to give it all these cons and dings because it's just a product of its time. It was a great monumental piece of technology when it was released, and I think it's one of my favorite iPhone releases that ever came out, simply just because of the design and just what it brought to the table. I think it's so great. But using it in 2020 is definitely a less than par experience, and I would not recommend it. But it has aged tremendously well. To pick up a phone that's 7 years old and use it, if you absolutely had to in a pinch, it would work just fine for you for what you need to do, which is quite impressive to say the least. And now for the moment you've been waiting for. Yes, I will be giving this phone away to one of you lucky viewers. I don't need it anymore. I don't think I need to keep it around. So if you want it, you can have it. To enter, be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment. When my channel hits 200 subscribers, I'll be doing a drawing out of the comments. So I'll pick a random comment from this video. And if you are subscribed, I will send you a message that you've won the phone, and then we can work on getting it over to you. So yeah. So needless to say, it was a bit of a long week with this phone. I was so happy and so excited to just switch back to my XS Max to feel like a breath of fresh air again. This was just a digital nightmare, and I did not enjoy using it at all. So it's just the nature of it. So it's a fun little iPod toy or something right now, but for as far as a usable productivity machine, it was just not for me. So that's how the iPhone 5S has held up and how it is using it in 2020. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel, leave a like on this video, leave a comment, let me know you're here. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think about using the iPhone 5S in 2020? How old is your phone? Maybe you used the iPhone 5S in 2020 and I just pointed out all of the pains and heartaches that you have with it. Who knows? So let me know, and thanks for watching.